In this video, I'm gonna walk you through 10 tips to improve your urban photography. And by urban photography, I mean street, architectural, and everything in between. And as you can probably guess, this genre of photography isn't my favorite, nor is it my best, as I'm currently filming this in a forest right now. But I do have some solid tips to give you for when I do go shoot in these environments. And I also have a bunch of buddies who prefer this type of photography that I've gotten some great advice from. So let's start from the top with tip number 1. And that is to focus on one part of a building if you're trying to shoot architectural shots. So instead of trying to get an entire building in a shot, which can be a fairly messy process, especially if there's a lot of people or distracting elements or construction going on in the area, focus on one part of it. So for example, find a window that you really like, or find a doorway entrance, or a certain type of architecture on that building that just looks neat to you. So break it down and focus on a more simple aspect of that building to get a better shot. The second tip I have is to be respectful if you're inside of a certain environment. So for example, if you're inside of a church, there's generally a few rules you want to follow depending on what type of religion you're entering. So for example, a lot of Christian churches, they want you to take off your hats and you're generally supposed to bless yourself when you walk in. And in general, just be quiet and respectful of the people around you. So don't be trying to get selfies, yelling to your buddy down the pews while you have a giant tripod set up in the middle right before mass is about to start. You want to time these correctly so there's not a lot of people there, and just be respectful of the people in these environments when you do arise. So it can be helpful to look up whatever type of church you're entering and make sure you're following their general rules to be respectful. And this will ensure you don't get kicked out the moment you walk in. And this also pertains to offices and any other type of environment as well. So a lot of these offices that have these really cool architectural scenes that you might be inside the lobby of, they have a lot of security guards. And if you're walking around very obviously with a tripod and making a scene, then you're gonna get kicked out pretty fast. So I just try and be respectful, be a bit more discreet, and just know what type of environment you're walking in, and you'll be able to get some good shots without immediately having to leave. The third tip I have is to look for events within a certain city. So if you're in a pretty bland town and you're not really sure what to shoot, maybe the buildings aren't insane and it's just kind of old and dilapidated, look for certain events that are happening soon. So for example, parades, or local gatherings at certain places, or concerts, or speeches, or even rallies. It's a great way to get some awesome shots. So show up at those times and then just see what the people do and how they interact with the environment around them, and that's a great way to get some shots. And of course, you're going to incorporate a lot of the compositional text we've gone through in this course into these certain scenes. One other thing about going to events is that I'd recommend being more on the assertive side. So a lot of photographers are generally seen as press, which gives you a little bit more freedom than the average person. So especially if you have a big camera with a long lens, you can generally just cut to the front a little bit easier. Sometimes I try and just get backstage by just acting confident. A lot of people will just assume that you're either the photographer on staff or you're with a news organization. So wait for them to tell you to leave before you go off and limit yourself. The fourth tip I have is to wait for the action to come to you. And this is more particular for street photography. So although it can seem tempting when you start street photography to just keep walking and wait for some interesting scene to emerge, one thing I like to do is find an area that I like. So perhaps you're at a train station or a place where there's a lot of people or a lot of cars or action or a cool composition you line up, and just wait for things to happen around you. So I'd say like a good time frame is like 15 to 30 minutes. Just hang out in that spot, see what kind of people are walking by, see what kind of reflections are emerging, see how the cars are moving through that area, and just wait for things to happen. It'll take a lot of the stress off of just constantly wandering around, and it'll make it a little bit easier. And then after 15 minutes, I go ahead and switch to a new spot. And you could rinse and repeat this for 2-3 hours and come back with a variety of cool shots. The fifth tip I have is to not shoot homeless people or children without permission. So homeless people, it's just generally frowned upon because they're in a lesser situation, and using them to create art or some type of scene that you're either going to sell or display on a social media platform just doesn't sit right with a lot of people. So, I mean, you can do this, especially if you talk to them and perhaps give them money and then ask for a portrait and maybe a story. I'd say that's the best way to go about it. And then same thing with children. it's gonna look creepy if you're just shooting random children on the street. So I'd ask the parents, make it very clear what type of image you're trying to convey before you go about doing that type of thing. The sixth tip I have is to get off the beaten path. So don't go where all the crowds and people are wandering through cities. So I'd urge you to explore parking garages or back alleyways or highway underpasses or even highway overpasses. So there have been times I've literally pulled over on the side of the freeway because the view from that bridge on the highway is just so awesome and has such a great lined up composition. So generally, you're gonna have to do these scenes pretty fast. I've done this a few times and I've ended up having the cops come because people have called in, yo, there's a dude on the side of the highway on this bridge with a tripod. It can look a little sketchy, so I'd recommend getting these shots fast and trying to get out of there, or else the cops most likely gonna tell you to move. It's not like you can get in trouble for this. I've never gotten a ticket, but you know, you will get told to move. People will probably be honking at you and stuff like that. So just ignore them and get that shot and then get out of there. So explore those areas most people don't walk around all the time, and you'll find some pretty interesting stuff happening. The seventh tip I have is to leave yourself several options when shooting in a city environment. So a lot of times you're gonna show up to a certain place that you plan on shooting and you're to discover it's under construction, or it's closed for the day, or there's some type of rally happening outside it causing a giant scene. So always, whenever I go to a city, I pick 2-3 places in the general area I want to shoot, just in case one of those is closed for a particular reason or whatever is going on there isn't disrupting the scene. So this will save you a lot of hassle, so you're not trying to figure out what to shoot when the sun is happening. Just have 2-3 places loaded up, ready to shoot at whenever you arrive. The eighth tip I have is for architectural abstracts. So if you're shooting very close, detailed portions of a building, don't be afraid to rotate those scenes when you're in the editing room. So this can provide a completely different looking composition. And if it's an abstract enough shot, most people aren't gonna be able to tell what's up and what's down. So think about what window panes can look like upside down or turned left or right, or with whatever different angle you can imagine. And this will give you a bunch of different composition ideas to work with. The ninth tip I have is to bring a water bottle with you for reflections. So one thing you can do, bring a water bottle in your backpack, and if you see a cool lit building, pour that water bottle on the ground and then get close to the ground, and now you have a built-in puddle that you can get a cool reflection shot of. So it's a great way to be able to just get a reflection shot on demand of literally whatever scene you come across, and literally it's just at the cost of a water bottle. So if you're really going into street photography, especially at night, bring 2-3 water bottles with you and you can get a bunch of cool scenes lined up. The 10th tip I have is to use a tilt shift lens. And this is for architectural photography in general, but it can also be used for other circumstances. So tilt shift lenses essentially alter the perspective of the lens in the camera. So this will allow you to remove distortion within the camera before you even go into the editing room. So this can help you get lines straight, get the perspective lined up perfectly, and in general, just get a better looking shot than what most lenses are capable of. However, tilt shift lenses can be a bit more expensive and they do have a little bit of a learning curve. So I'd recommend practicing with them before you go out. And one other cool thing that tilt shift lenses can do is they can make it seem like the entire city you're shooting, if you're shooting from up above or from a high angle, can look like almost a miniature scene. So it's hard to describe, but if you Google tilt shift lenses, cityscapes, you can see some pretty cool shots. It looks like some kind of board that people designed a city on for miniature people. So it's a really cool genre of photography that's not very well known and has a pretty big market category right now if you're looking for something to niche down into. So those are my 10 tips for urban photography. Let's go ahead and jump into the next video.